Here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very first live RSO workshop. I recognize that we're in a very unique time right now, and I want to thank you for being here with us. My name is Jocelyn Bravo. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm the program coordinator for involvement and student organization development. We also have Risha here with us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Risha Gator. Like Jocelyn said, I work in the Student Union and Event Services office. I am the business manager for that area, and I will have some information to share with you later on.
If you all have any questions, go ahead and take down that involvement@unlv.edu email address and feel free to shoot any of your questions our way. And between Risa and myself, we'll be sure to answer any questions that you might have or help answer them. This workshop is also going to be recorded and downloaded to our YouTube channel later for access. So if any of your RSO members want to view this later, if they were to attend today, they'll be able to do that, and I'll get that downloaded later on today too. All right, so today we're going to talk about officer transitions within your RSO. It's important to remember that all RSOs operate differently, and so some of the things that we're going to talk about today might not be completely applicable to your organization, but you can adjust it to fit the needs of your organization. I also know that in a time like this, it can be necessary to change your priorities and also encouraged between your RSO involvement to take care of yourself or others. But if you're able to set up a strong officer transition, it's going to be really helpful when we're all able to get back together. A strong officer transition can help alleviate some of the stressors and anxiety of running an RSO, especially if it's your first time or being in a position for the first time, especially when it's possible you haven't seen any of your members for months. So let's talk about some of the best practices around officer transitions. And we're going to start with what that looks like. So setting up your next board for success. You're going to want to, it's not just about like handing over a manual or a password. You're going to want to recap the past year and everything that has been going on within the organization, everything that has happened within your position. And then you're going to want to transfer all of that information to the next person that's coming in. You're definitely going to want to work with that person to plan ahead for what's to come, and especially recognizing the past couple of months that we've had too. What does that look like as you plan ahead for your organization? So looking at your past year, what were some of the goals that your organization or you set within your position in 2019, 2020? What are some of the things that you accomplished? What are some of the challenges that came up and the lessons that were learned within those challenges? Maybe how did you adjust some of those goals that you set as COVID-19 hit? And maybe what are some of the goals that you want to continue and carry on for next year? And so maybe one of the goals for your programs was to increase attendance by 5%. And maybe your organization hit that goal this year. So maybe continue to increase, so you're able to increase it by another 5% upcoming year. That can just be an example of some of the might have from last year that you want to bring this next year. Then you're going to want to take a look at your event calendar from this past year. What kind of programs did you have? Were your programs successful? And if so, what was successful about them? What made them successful? You'll want to talk about which events you want to continue on. Maybe you're going to make it an annual event within your organization. And you'll also want to talk about the balance of your programs. Did you have a balance of programs month to month, semester to semester? Did you have a balance of programs when it comes to some of the UNLV programs that happen? Or maybe one of your events happened right when UNLV homecoming was going on, and so maybe you didn't get the attendance that you wanted to. So talk about some of those things, right? Talk about the balance of programs when it comes to some of your annual events. Were you really heavy in the fall? And then you can bring some of those programs, workshops over to the spring. good things to talk about when looking over your past year when it comes to some of the events. And of course, maybe there were some events too that because of COVID-19, you weren't able to put on. So let's talk about moving those over to the next academic school year too. You want to take a look at your member engagement, evaluate the number of members within your RSO, take a look at their commitment to the organization. Did you have many members? Did you have not enough members? Or did you have just the right amount of members? How active were your members? Is that the type of participation that is needed within your organization? Or what steps do you want to take to make your member engagement look a little bit different for the upcoming year? You'll look at your recruitment efforts within the past year. What did recruitment look like for you this year? Did your organization participate in things like involvement fair? Did you put marketing and recruitment up for your organization? Do you want to have different methods coming into the next year, or were these methods that you used this past year effective? How are you going to recruit members or new leadership for your positions as your organization continues to grow? Speaking of that, you're going to want to talk about and take a look at the officers and organization structure in your RSO. Some of the RSOs have a structure very similar to like a president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, scheduling liaison, things like that. Does that structure work for you? Do the officer layouts work for what your organization needs? Or are there some changes that you want to make going into the next year? Does your organizational structure for your organization? Or can some of your officers be combined? Or does one of your officers have a really heavy load of responsibilities? Maybe you can split up those two different positions so you can create a new position or a leadership role in your organization. So some of the things that you can start to think about. And then most importantly, celebrate your successes, especially in a year like this where I know you've been met with challenges that we never thought possible. Right? So celebrate all of the things that happened this year and growth and all of the things that you as organizations have done throughout this past year. All right, so let's talk about our officer transition meeting. It's important to schedule an officer transition meeting with your outgoing and incoming officers. And these are some of the things that you're going to want to discuss. You want to take a look at the responsibilities of the organization position and talk about what those responsibilities mean. What is the difference, for example, between the role of a president and the role of the vice president within your organization? And so that means taking a look at the position description that you all have for your positions within the organization. You'll definitely want to take a look at your annual duties. And so, for example, an annual duty might be your annual RSO registration, which happens every fall semester. So who takes care of that? Is it your president? Is it the scheduling liaison? Make sure that everybody is aware of the different annual duties that the positions might have. Another good thing is going to be unfinished projects, especially when I think about our past couple of months. What were some of the things that maybe you or your organization planned to have happen within the past couple of months that maybe looked a little bit different or maybe got postponed? What are some of the things that we can put on for this upcoming semester as we come back, hopefully in the fall classes, right? Like, what are some of the things that we can together from that? You also want to talk about some of the tips for effective meetings. So whether you're running those meetings, what are some of the things that you've seen be effective? Or if you're on the executive board, are you someone that gives out reports during meetings? And if so, what are some of the things that you report on? What are some of the things that membership likes to hear from you? And also, what are some of the things that you want to be on the lookout while you're engaging in meeting, right? And so if you're the social media chair, you probably want to pay attention to some of the events that are going on so that you can start to post them on your social media so that your attendance rates are higher, so you're meeting that goal of increasing participation, right? So tips about how to be effective during meetings and giving out reports, sending reports wherever they need to go. And then, of course, really big is to transfer all access and go over everything. So as an organization, I know a lot of our RSOs are using Google for their like email addresses and Google Drive to store a lot of their information. So make sure we're transferring that over to the next position. If you have organization position emails, transfer that access and email over, and also go over different things with them. And so if your organization is using different platforms, talk to them about the different platforms and what they mean. And so, for example, if you have a historian who oversees all of your photos and keeping different pieces for historical background, and they post them all on a picture website, like you want to go over what that website is, how to get into it, and also some of the things that you keep in there to document the history of your organization. So not just giving them the keys to the car, but telling them how to drive it too, right? Okay. So as you're transferring access, these are some of the things that a lot of our RSOs have under them to make sure to pass it on to the next person coming into their role. And so, of course, you have your RSO email account. Several of our RSOs have UNLV RSO related accounts. And so if you would like one set up, feel free to reach out to us and we can help you out with that. And if you're using one of like your Google email accounts, things like that, always make sure to pass everything over to the next executive board member. You're going to want to transfer all of your social media pages, whether that's like your Facebook, your Instagram, maybe you have Twitter that you used to use a couple years ago. Like, you want to make sure you're transferring all of these things, not just the things that you're using right now. And so some of that historical background data and information can be passed on from year to year, position to position. If your organization has external websites or even national websites that they're associated with, you'll want to make sure to pass on that information of how to log in. There's a specific username and password that needs to be affiliated with that process. And so getting all of that information to them too. I know some of our RSOs also have the national websites where there's a lot of resources that they can use. Taking them through the steps of accessing those different resources as well is going to be important. So that's some of the things that you're going to transfer over. Of course, you're going to want to give members all of the marketing. And so things like your logos, your branding, maybe any of those photo archives that we were talking about, even your old previous marketing materials can be helpful for RSOs. And so passing on all of that. You're going to want to make sure that you're passing the NSHE supplier information. And so if you've done like Ways and Means or things like that, or if you've participated in Festival of Communities, you have to go and become an NSHE supplier. So somebody that's attached to one of the students. And so you'll want to transfer that over to the next incoming student that's going to be overseeing that area, so that if there's any email or communication that goes out, that they're able to also access that information and log in and continue being a supplier if they want to participate in things like that. And then, of course, if there's other communication systems that you might have, be sure to pass that along too. And if RSOs get locked out of any of these portals, it can make things really complicated. And it can sometimes be a huge hassle to get access to some of these things later. So be sure to pass them along. Here's some other examples of things that you might want to share out to your folks. Things like your previous meeting minutes and agendas, maybe calendar of events, of course, your upcoming SUS reservations, any of your Google Web archives, historical or documentation that you might have, preferred vendors and pre-vendors. And so if you have your RSO that you will out to market your organization, make sure that you have that information stored somewhere in case you need to reorder shirts. You know exactly what was ordered. You have the same exact logo if you need that. So you can continue to market yourself and brand yourself in the way that you would like. You want to pass along, of course, like your timelines, your organizing documents, those officer roles and expectations that we talked about later. These are all great things that you're going to want to pass on to the next leader too. And then, of course, we can't forget the Involvement Center. On the Involvement Center, you're going to want to make sure to update your primary contact, You want to update all of your officers and scheduling liaisons. Make sure that your roster is completely up to date. You're going to want to take a look at your review state or your mission statement, your constitution, and any other supporting documents or forms that you might have that live on the Involvement Center. It's really important that your new officers are added onto the Involvement Center because only officers listed on the Involvement Center have access to make changes to the organization's page on the Involvement Center. And so, for example, when it's time to re-register your organization for the 2020-2021 academic year, only officers have access to be able to do that. And so you don't want to lock out the organization from being able to operate and reach or hit some of those deadlines that they might need to participate in when the time comes. And hopefully y'all participated in priority registrations with SUES. And so with that, keep in mind that only your scheduling liaison that's listed on the Involvement Center is able to make those reservations. And so you want to make sure that everything is up to date on the Involvement Center. And of course, if the person who's making those reservations is maybe a graduating senior, to make sure that you're updating everything with SUES so that they know who your new scheduling liaison replacement might be too. So really good things to keep in mind. Alrighty, and so going into some of the finance pieces, when you're doing your officer transition, when it comes to like your leadership and finances, you want to provide historical financial documents to the incoming board. And so you're going to want to talk about your previous budgets, current budget, the health of your organization. You want to transfer signing authority on non-UNLV bank accounts. And so remember that there should be at least two students attached as signers to your bank accounts. You want to document all of your account numbers, and so make sure that those are always remembered. We often have RSOs come to us asking if we have information about their banks because they went to go sign up for a new bank at a new bank, but the bank told them they already had an account, but unfortunately it was never documented, and so the information was never passed on. So they were kind of locked out of their account. So it's really important that we're passing along all of these account information and changing the signers attached to them. You want to contact the IRS to transfer the names on your EIN number if you have one. You want to pass along any unpaid invoices, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then you're going to want to make sure that you're working to provide information about ways and means budget requests that might be outstanding. And so ways and means, they've extended deadline this year to August 1st to spend any that organizations have received. And so that's going to be really important to pass along because if they have received funding, they still need to submit everything after they've spent all of the money. And so the process is not completed yet until everything has been turned in. And so if the organization leadership members are on their way out of the organization positions, the new members are going to have to make sure to take responsibility and make sure that everything gets turned into ways and means as well. And then you're going to want to discuss accountability organization funds. Will improve spending your money. What are ways that your organization definitely does not spend money? And so there's that accountability measure, and it's helpful to have two signers attached to the bank accounts for accountability measures to keep everybody kind of on the same page when it comes to finances. All right, and then working with your advisor. So the way that one student leader works with the advisor might be completely different than the way that another student leader works with your advisor. So it's important to set up in the beginning of your working relationship mutual expectations of what that relationship is going to look like. And so talking to your advisor about how involved they are going to be, how involved you need them to be, and then they're also going to set the same expectations with you as the student leader. You want to talk about how engaged you need them when it comes to things like operating your budget, things like attending meetings in person or attending events. A lot of the times advisors will say, like, I will be at what you want me to be and where you want me to be, like, as it is important to you. And so setting those expectations of what is important to both of you so that you can be on the same level. You're going to want to facilitate those connections between the new leadership and the advisor. And so, for example, the outgoing president might want to set up a meeting with the outgoing president, incoming president, and then, of course, the advisor, so they can have a conversation about years past, transfer, officer transition, and then also planning out for the next year to come. And then talking about planning ahead, that's going to be that like what's next type of thing. Setting your goals for this next year, for 2020, 2021 academic year. What does that look like for you? What types of things would you like to see? Also learning from some of the challenges that you faced within this past year. What are some lessons learned from that, and how do you want to improve your organization and your position and goals for this upcoming year? You, of course, want to talk about your recruitment plans and timelines. How do you want to recruit this year? Do you need more members? Are you looking to change your timelines when it comes to officer transition or when your new executive board takes office? Things like that. Of course, formally updating your organization chart. And so if you're making any changes to responsibilities or the structure of your organization, putting that into place so that when your new executive board takes office, that they're able to start with that like ready to go. You want to talk about officer and making connections with them to some of the stakeholders or partners that they work with often. And so if your scheduling liaison is brand new to the position, for example, maybe going over to Student Union Event Services front desk and talking to them about maybe the best practices when it comes to making reservations, right? So a little tips, tricks that they might be telling you is that, hey, when you're making a reservation, it's a really good idea to put multiple spaces in there just in case your first space or your first time requested is unavailable. So that's a little something that like making those like connections might be really helpful in a relationship for a new officer. And then, of course, solicit some feedback for growth. Talk to the organization, talk to the officer, advisor, talk to the officers, of course, about like what's to come. Like what are some things that they experienced or they noticed throughout this past year that could be used to grow the organization, to grow the position into what you want it to be for the next year. All right, so we're going to go over some billings stuff with Risha. Take it over.
All right, thanks, Jocelyn. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. So this is my title and everything, and how you can reach me. Below it says Event Services Billing at unlv.edu. That is the best email to reach out to should you have any questions about any invoicing or costs that have been billed to you and want to question what it looks like or why it was billed to you in that manner. I can answer some of those questions, but if your event was assigned an event coordinator, that is usually where we will default that question back to. Sometimes I can answer it for myself, but other times I'll reach out to my colleagues to see if I can get some information from them just to assist you. But that event services billing at unlv.edu is your best bet to get in contact with me. Go ahead to the next slide. So just to give a little bit of history too, the Student Union Event Services Office is your main spot to book your events at. Jocelyn did give you a lot of information on that. So anything that is booked underneath our office and you have questions about or concerns about, you can always come to us and we'll do our best to make sure that we answer it for you and help out in any way possible. So the first thing on this list when it comes to paying for your event, just to, don't let your outstanding invoices fall through the cracks during your transitions. We do have student groups who have defaulted on those events, and sometimes we have to lock all services on those RSOs, and so it blocks those future members from being able to book anything or have anything going on while that outstanding invoices is pending. So always communicate with me if there's anything that I can help with and try to get things ironed out for you. But again, just to change your billing contact for all outstanding events or invoices, it must be done by the scheduling liaison. You can also come to our office, and I believe it's called a change form at our front desk. You can put that information in there as well. That is also the same form you would use should you need to change a room or equipment or anything like that. We accept cash, check, or credit card from RSOs when it comes to payments. Not everything that RSOs book on their events has a charge on it. There are certain things that are 100% discounted. So it really depends on what your event is set up as to determine if there will be a charge. And then UNLV departments cannot pay for your event, but there are minimal exceptions to this. So specifically speaking, if an RSO is linking with a department to put on an event, the department is receiving, it depends on which way it's going. So if the department is receiving majority of the services and the RSO is just helping, then it will be put underneath the department's discounts. And then it'll be flipped if the RSO is receiving the majority of the services, it will be put under the RSO's discounts. So there's two different discounting systems that we have set up based on if you're an RSO or if you're coming from a department. And anyone can submit payment on an event. It does not have to be the scheduling liaison, but if there's any changes that need to occur, then the scheduling liaison would be the best person to make those changes. Go ahead, Jocelyn. Okay, the responsibility to pay your invoice, it defaults to those who are on the reservation as well as the organization. So an example of that, say for instance, there's an RSO who has two of their main people who are on their reservation, that those two people are the sole responsible folks for the charge, but we will also put a block on the entire organization if that invoice is not fulfilled within the 30-day requirement. So we do allow 30 days for this for invoices to be fulfilled. Anything past that would need to be a conversation that needs to be set up with some type of payment plan. But just making sure that everyone knows that it is the responsibility of the organization that all invoices are paid, and then the names of the folks who are associated to those events would need to make sure that that is paid as well. So if that those two folks have graduated and moved on, and the RSO is looking to book, we will default that bill to those main sources, but it would cause a hang up in those main sources financial backing with the university. So if you see later on, I'm sorry, later on down, there's a bullet that says we will reach out to student conduct to put a freeze on accounts. So that will block those students from receiving diplomas. It will block them from receiving transcripts. It will hold off a lot of things that are associated to them completing their university career with UNLV if there's any outstanding charges that are not fulfilled. So again, just I'm pretty limber when it comes to setting up payment plans with RSOs because I understand there are students first. I just ask that we just keep the timeline as tight as possible with getting it fulfilled, and then we can just, there will be no holds that are put on there after that. So if there's at any point there's an adverse circumstance, please reach out to us and let us know, and we'll make sure that we do everything we can to assist in that fashion.
Awesome. Thank you, Risha.
You're welcome.
So a couple important dates as we transition for the rest of this semester. So RSO registration, I've mentioned that a few times, begins August 1st. And so be on the lookout for information about re-registering your organization. And then of course, the involvement fair happens first couple of weeks of fall semester. Our date is currently to be determined, so be on the lookout for marketing coming from our office, so we can let you know about all the release dates and of course when the registration comes, because I know that you want your favorite spot when it comes to involvement fair tables. And then, of course, lastly, pass the gavel, if you will, but don't go missing. Stay available to your new leadership, just in case they have questions as they take over the positions for you. Be there as a resource for them and hopefully help guide them through. Pass along some of your like nuggets of knowledge as you've come into the position. Of course, like what are some of the things that you wish you knew coming into the role? What are some hard lessons that you learned as you took over your position? Things like that. And so in closing, I'm going to put that email up there again for you, involvement@unlv.edu. Feel free to pass along any of your questions. And thank you so much for joining us today. Let us know if you need anything. Thanks, y'all.